upstairs. I will point out that the stage is really scary, and I'm not going to move a lot because it squeaks and I feel like I'm going to fall. So I'm sorry, I will be behind the podium. So I'm here this morning to talk to you about cybersecurity and human nature. Quick table of contents, how we're going to go through it today. A little bit about me, how I got here, going through how human nature affects your cybersecurity, some of the social engineering techniques that I've seen, you've seen, and how we can combat that, and then how your IT team fits into the mix. So I actually have a political science degree. I worked down in DC for about 6 years, got my MBA, and now I'm here, which is a roundabout way of getting into cybersecurity. But I was down in DC when the SEC and HIPAA changed all of their regulations in 2015 and 2016, and I needed to get all of my clients up to their new regulations. So I was in the trenches learning about how technology and cybersecurity affected the business, as well as the side of the regulations. Just to start out, I have a quick video clip for you that I hope will play. We'll see. Yes, please. Good. Anyway, so you've all seen the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio. That is based on a real-life person named Frank Abagnale and how he used his charm and manipulation techniques to get around society to defraud people and cash checks. I'm sure you've seen the movie. So that is actually something something people can use to get your data as well. So I have a quick clip, hopefully, if it wants to play for me. Nope, okay, it's not gonna play. I will walk you through the clip. Leonardo DiCaprio flirts with a bank teller to get her to show him how the bank cashes a check. So he knows exactly what he needs to get money from the bank without having to have a real check. So do you know if your people, whoever runs the front desk, whoever's in charge of your server room, this also applies to people who just walk into your office. One of the biggest social engineering techniques comes from pretending to be who you're not. So if someone shows up dressed as a Spectrum repairman or a Verizon repairman, or says they're a lawyer, says they're a CPA asking for a whole bunch of information, human nature is going to tell us just to let them do it, especially if people are complaining, if you know that there's an audit going on. You try to be helpful. That's just what we all do. But that's how people get into your systems, into your data, and they can take anything they want once they're inside. So if your receptionist has let a lawyer into the building because he's working on a case, he can sit there and plug into a wired port and get access to anything he wants on your network. And that's the first part of social engineering that Catch Me If You Can really goes through on the money side, not the cybersecurity side, but it's very applicable today as well. And the next part of that goes into social media social engineering. I'm sure all of you have seen the posts on Facebook, Instagram, asking, what's your stripper name? And it's asking for, what is your mother's maiden name mixed with your first pet's name? Seems innocent enough, but those are the things that are the security questions when you're trying to reset your password. So if a hacker can't guess your password, they're going to try to reset it. That's how they work. If you're putting all of that information out there with your security questions, they can get that without a problem. You're done. So some things, there are ways to combat a little bit, just a little bit. I really wanted to give you guys actionable items on how to help prevent these things. So first and foremost, please encourage your users to choose security answers that are fake. You can still pick the where'd you go on your honeymoon as a security answer to reset your password, but if you have pictures from your honeymoon in Bora Bora on Facebook that are geotagged, anybody can go look at that. So maybe pick another city that is still meaningful and you can remember, but then it's not going to give those hackers that data point. So pick where you were born, where you grew up, where you went to college, where your last vacation was. Pick anything that's not real. You can still use the answers that you're going to remember, but it's those data points that help them get in. A lot of security questions also have finite answers. A common one that I see when you're resetting your password is, what was the color of your first car? How many colors are there really? 10? Blue, white, green, black, tan? It's not that many. So if a hacker is even guessing, they only have 10 things to guess. If you have to choose those questions, Encourage your users, your colleagues, your coworkers. Again, not a fake answer per se. You can still choose a color, but instead of saying white, you can say champagne or snowflake, something that a hacker isn't going to guess. Because that gets us to the other side of human nature and how hackers see your network. If you put up a roadblock, they're less likely to get inside. When you make things more difficult, people lose interest really fast. If you make it easy, that's when they keep going. And that brings me to the last one, which is actually how I got here today and how I met Tyler with Wheat and how all of this started. I was at the New York State Bankers Association conference watching Tyler's presentation, and he does his presentations the exact opposite of mine. He does how hackers see your network instead of how to defend against the hackers. So he had shown 3 different security postures for 3 different companies. There was a university, a Fortune 500, and a mom and pop shop. And it went through all of the steps that they had done to get into the network for their penetration testing. So we'd asked the audience, what do all 3 of these have in common? And I raised my hand because I saw that none of them had multi-factor authentication enabled, which would have stopped them at step 2. He got a little bit mad at me because I guess that ruined his slides from further down in his presentation, but that's literally how I got here today, because multi-factor authentication is a huge way to stop them. And it's not foolproof. I'm sure you've seen in the news you can get around multi-factor authentication, but it's making it harder for them. And the harder you can make it for them to get into your systems, the easier they're going to give up. And last but not least, which I'm hoping you all know, please don't put passwords on Post-its and write them places. That's just a bad idea all the time. And especially with the older generations in the workplace and at schools, they can't remember their passwords, and I get that. But it's up to you as the IT staff, as a fellow user, to help them remember in a way that somebody can't just go pick up their keyboard and get their password. If you do have multi-factor authentication enabled, then again, it is better, but yeah.
I've got a perfect example for you. I used to work for a tier 1 backbone. The level 3 support person had the 10 passwords we used under his keyboard. I worked the late shift. One day I needed to get into one of the national routers. I just walked over to his desk.
Yeah, that should never happen.
I know, and I shouldn't have done it 20-something years ago, but that's how easy it is, and that's how widespread that mistake is.
Yeah, and you think, duh, of course I'm not going to do that. And when you hear things like this, it's not as duh as you think. So remind people, if you do see that happening, there are better ways. Help them remember. And that brings us to phishing again. Mostly the older generation. Looking around the room right now, I'm pretty sure all of you would be okay with a phishing scenario. But users have a tendency to click on things that they shouldn't. One of my colleagues a few weeks ago actually called me into his office because he got an email from a known competitor in our area, and it was something about a final bid. But he knew it was suspicious, so he called me in to check. And I went through, and all of the links went to some sketchy website in Brazil. It was clearly not a legitimate email. And that was great. He was trained enough to be suspicious, but at the end, after we had come to that conclusion, his first response was, I kind of want to click it anyway, just in case. Curiosity will kill. You can't plan for that, really, in your cybersecurity plan. It's not a training thing. He was clearly trained. He knew to ask me if it was legit, but he still wanted to click on it. So that's where we get into the culture of your organization, whether it's a school, a business, or even your personal life, and how that can affect your cybersecurity posture. One of the things that I recommend, again, actionable, I wanted to give actionable things, is to make cybersecurity part of your culture. A lot of users don't know how their actions affect the company, the IT staff. They have no idea how it affects your compliance. So if you're talking about what happens next, they're less likely to give into that curiosity. So if Arnold from accounting knew that clicking on that email was going to cause the IT staff, doesn't matter how many of them, to have to work late that night because they're scanning the machines, they're restoring from backups. If they know the effect on people, maybe they'd be less likely to click on that. Curiosity is one thing, but knowing how it affects other people, that's a very different thing. And having that in your culture should hopefully help to have people not click on things. Users also don't tend to know or understand or honestly even care how their behavior affects the whole business, whether it's a small mom and pop shop or a bigger business. So one of my clients down in DC a few years ago, they were a financial firm. They needed to be SEC compliant. So they'd hired a new analyst, as they did often, and she called in one day in a tizzy. She was sending a lot of emails, but her sent box was empty. So she called in, there was some client she was working with, she needed to check something from her sent items box, and there was nothing there. So according to her, it was an emergency. And indeed it was an emergency, but not for the reason she thought it was. I actually had to hang up on her and her freak out so that I could call their compliance officer, I could start doing the forensics, I could start documenting all of the timelines, the details, the symptoms. We didn't know how bad it was yet. She had no idea. She just thought, oh my God, I can't get to my data. So luckily there was no actual breach, no data was transmitted or accessed. She had ended up clicking on an email to change her password, gave the malicious actor her credentials. He logged in via OA, and he set up a rule in her inbox to delete everything from sent items and deleted items to cover the fact that he was sending out phishing emails as her. So luckily, no breach happened, but she had absolutely no idea what she just triggered. So it was 2 days worth of her compliance officer having to do things, my engineers having to do things, me having to sign off on it for the SEC saying, yes, this happened, no data was transmitted. But she had no idea. So if she knew all of those things ahead of time, if that was in the culture when she was brought on how your actions affect the business, maybe she would have been a little more careful. There could have been even a fine. In especially financial companies, the fines could have been enormous. What she had done, if it had given away enough information, that company could have gone under. Like, fines can be in the millions. But she had no idea. So building that into your culture is a great way that you can help protect yourself, your company, your schools, so that people are just a little bit more aware. Awareness is, again, more than just knowing what a phishing email is. It's how it affects everybody else. And that brings us to NIST, just a little bit on the framework side. It's really overwhelming to figure out where to start with your cybersecurity practice, and NIST luckily has a framework already that you can work with. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty, that would be a completely different presentation, but it does address the human aspect of cybersecurity and give you a framework to work with to build that up. So if you're not familiar with it, look it up. It's widespread, it's online, you can go through how it affects you. But it's the communication and the people that they're really focused on, because they get that it's not just the technology you have, the tools that you use, it's your people and how they use them and how aware they are of your surroundings and what's really going on. And that brings me to my last point, because passwords and security questions and social engineering is just part of it. Another huge aspect of cybersecurity and the human aspect of cybersecurity is maintenance items. We all know the Equifax breach, and that was caused by one guy not installing a patch on the web app. Even though it was there, he just didn't do it. And that is what caused the Equifax breach. Millions of dollars, millions of people affected, one guy not installing a patch. So why would that guy not install a patch? It's the same reason that all of us don't run the updates on our computers. Don't do the firmware updates. It takes time, there's often downtime, and if you're in a business setting, you also have people yelling at you for that downtime. So if you're the CFO complaining about being down every time you want to do an update on your firewall, are you going to prioritize the update on your firewall? Probably not. You're going to get yelled at. And that ties back into the culture of cybersecurity, but not even just cybersecurity, because it's normal maintenance, and you all probably understand how important that is, but most users don't, most executives don't, and that's where everything tends to fall down. So again, I wanted some actionable items for us so that you could go through and have something to make it better. So building and scheduled downtime is very important, and I hope all of you already have that. It seems like a basic thing, but so does not writing your password on a Post-it note, so I have to say it. Build and schedule downtime. This should not be coming from the IT department. This should be coming as a company policy. The IT department already catches flack for things all the time. It's not their job to tell your entire company, we have to go down for 2 hours so I can install updates. It should be a company policy coming from the top down, and if it's scheduled and communicated, that also gets rid of some of the inconvenience. Like if you know it's gonna be down Thursday night from 8 to 10, you can plan around that. Like there's no reason you need to do things Thursday between 8 and 10. So if it's communicated company-wide, you're expecting it, it's a lot different than when you get an email from the IT guy saying, sorry, email's gonna be down for 2 hours, I have to install an update. So plan ahead, it'll make people happier, and then the updates can get installed a lot easier. Your IT staff needs support. A lot of you are probably on the IT staff, so you probably know this. 8 and 10 on a Thursday night is not normal business hours. That means somebody's working late to do those things. They have to be there, do it, test it, make sure everything's up and running, and then if it goes badly, it's probably going to be after 10. Are they still going to be at work the next day at 9 a.m.? Are they going to be given a little leeway so they can stay home and actually get some sleep because they were up until 2 fixing this? Make sure you take care of the IT staff. Their jobs are important, and nobody realizes how much extra they work just to make sure you're up and running. And if you are on the IT staff, you're probably agreeing you don't know how to do this, but I can send this to your supervisors too and tell them the same thing. Everybody needs sleep. Everybody needs a break. And if you're working late to do all of these updates, you're missing out on family time, you're missing out on your hobbies. It's a lot, and IT staff needs the support behind them before anything's actually going to work properly. And then finally, what updates mean for the company. Again, users don't know, they don't care. It's IT, it's not their job. The accounting people, the marketing people, they don't care until you understand what that means for the company. So an analogy that I like is changing the oil in your car. You change the oil in your car every 3,000 miles because it makes it run more efficiently. It doesn't necessarily mean that your car was running badly, but you know that you have to do it. It's a normal maintenance item. So if you explain that to your users in a similar way, the equipment needs to be updated, kind of like your car needs an oil change. That doesn't mean it's down right now. Doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means it has to happen to continue to working well. Or even with a house, you have to do maintenance on your house. It doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong right now, but you want to prevent that. So it's an understanding and a culture of cybersecurity that will make your lives easier and allow you to do what you need to do. I actually saw, again, my client down in DC, I worked there a while. One of my clients there, they worked in politics, it's DC, everybody works in politics, and we had scheduled maintenance windows for most of our managed services clients. Once a month, once every 2 weeks, depending on the client. So it was June 2016, right before the election, and they opted not to do their normal maintenance. They couldn't afford to be down during election season. 2 weeks later, we saw all of the alerts that their Exchange server was getting hit because they hadn't installed the firmware update that was released for their firewall because they had skipped their normal maintenance period. None of those things made sense in their head at the time. They were just mad. But it sucks to know this as an IT professional and see it affect your clients because they just don't get it. Or the person who was making the call didn't get it. Some of them probably did. Until they're hit, there's very little you can do after that. You need to be very proactive with it. So I'm hoping that explaining it in a way that makes sense to the everyman every day will make it so that nobody would ever skip their normal maintenance periods. So just as a wrap-up and summary, the actionable items that hopefully you can do to combat the human nature problem of cybersecurity: give users ways to get out of these simple security answers questions, passwords. Everyone needs ideas for this. Just provide them. They might think it's funny. They might just laugh you off, but at least it's in the back of their head. Put multi-factor authentication on anything and everything, especially if there's sensitive data. All of these breaches, not all of, many of these breaches can be prevented if you've got that other layer of security because it halts them. It makes it a lot more difficult, and I'm sure all of you have been in the exact same position where as soon as something gets hard, you don't want to do it anymore. Make it hard for the hackers. You will be safer. The culture of cybersecurity. That's on everybody in this room, not just people who are high up. You can talk about this, especially if you're in IT. Make people aware. You know the things. They don't. Talk about it. Don't be judgmental about it. Just get it out there. Get everybody thinking in a way of, I could prevent this. I am important for this. And that goes to every person. Make sure every person is a part of this, from the C-level down to the interns. Our intern, personally, I remember when she first started and she was trying to help get, I don't know, one of our marketing campaigns for cybersecurity going. She had no idea that she should back up her computer. Absolutely no idea. And that's fine, she's a student, she probably doesn't have to. But those are the ways that people think. They don't realize how it affects anything. So everybody in your organization should be aware and knowledgeable and feel comfortable asking questions. It's okay to ask questions. Questions are a whole lot better than just clicking on things. And finally, support your IT staff if you don't. I'm sure all of you do, or are IT staff. But they need to know that they're valued, they need the time off, and they need to be fresh and ready to go. If they're half asleep, they're not going to notice that things are happening and shouldn't. That's all I have for you right now. Does anybody have questions? Or stories? Yeah.
I'm just curious, we all have, we all have the security awareness program.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that you have seen in your personal experience that's been really successful for you, that really has impact as far as security awareness training?
So there's two sides to that. One is the actual products. So Fish Me, Know Before, very popular products for security awareness training. And they do a good job on the phishing and the vishing and the testing, but it still focuses more on the technical and, don't click on this because XYZ, don't answer this because XYZ. And that's why I wanted to focus a lot on the culture also, because watching a video, how many of us actually watch those videos? It's a lot better if you're talking about it internally and they understand how it affects people. I feel like that's where it hits home, because if you clicked on an email today and she couldn't go home for another 8 hours, she's not going to be very happy. But you're not necessarily going to have any idea because you're not in the same department. So talking about how it affects the other people around and what it really means, I have found to be a lot better than just those paid trainings where you have to watch a video.
I mean, do you do, phishing exercise testing, quarterly, monthly?
Minimum monthly, and then at least Know Before, which is the one that I use and love. They allow you to put people who have clicked into different groups so that they get tested more often, but you also don't want to annoy people. Like users and the convenience of it, and all of that is just as important as testing them. So we have it set up so anybody who clicks gets it a little more often, but if you don't, then it's just the monthly reminder of, okay, I should pay attention.
Do you have, do you have frequent flyers, frequent offenders? Do you have certain points where, okay, this person has clicked twice in the last 6 months, they get a certain training? Or this person is 3 times or 4 times, or 4 times, you're out, you're fired. What's your experience with that?
I have not seen a company fire somebody over clicking a phishing email, but at least in Know Before, you set that up automatically when you go through the initial configuration, so that if this, then that. So if clicked twice in 6 months, then you get this level of training. And there's different levels of training within this tool as well. It's a great tool, highly recommend. But you can decide all of that up front, and of course you get the reports. So we always recommend showing the reports to the C-suite. That way they see, the progress of most people, and they also see all of the people who are still clicking, because then you might want to take it offline out of that tool and do an in-person training to talk to them about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Yeah.
How do you feel about products like Have I Been Pwned? I have subscribed to the notifications for the domain for the school where I work, and I get them, but I'm not 100% sure what to do with the data once I have it.
That's a great question, and a lot of people feel that way with any tools, whether it's Have I Been Pwned, if it's a SIM tool, even if it's just a monitoring alert for disk space. Not knowing what to do with the alerts is half the problem. And for that one in particular, it depends on where it's coming from. Everything is always going to be an it depends, but I feel like there are probably some online classes that you can look at that will walk you through why you're getting that alert. And that's part of being a cybersecurity professional. Like, you need to kind of understand where all of that is coming from before you can make an educated decision on what to do about it. And that's where, you know, companies like mine and Grey Castle also come in, so that we can help you do that. A lot of people don't have the internal resources to go through all of those things, and we understand that. So ATech Group has managed services to help with that. Many other companies in the area do too. It does not necessarily need to just be on you, but training and learning and knowing what that means is a huge part of cybersecurity. Yeah.
Well, phishing is a problem. One of the bigger issues, and I'd like to know how you address, is whaling, because sometimes those folks think they're smarter than the average bear.
They do. Whaling is very annoying as a cybersecurity professional. And that, again, comes into how you explain the situation to the C-suite. That's when it gets to be a personal thing. Like, you need to have the right person talking to them to make them understand it. And they are also included in all of the phishing tests, and we have a whaling group as well, because they're usually targeted in a very different way. But I will say that, again, it's a personal touch that you need to have, and not necessarily you. Maybe there's someone else on your team who they listen to and can explain it better. But getting through to the C-suite, especially if they're of a certain generation and don't get it, it's a skill. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm unfamiliar with the term whaling.
Fishers that go after only the big guns. So they're going after the CEOs, the CFOs, presidents. They check LinkedIn and things for those titles, and they target them very, very specifically so that, again, they respond. Yeah.
What's the best way to approach, you know, the whales in these situations? So, for instance, we had an issue where our president's email was compromised, and it turns out that he had a password for the password. So I was the one that sat down with him and said, hey, you can create a sharp password that is very resilient and make it something that we can just super easy to remember no matter, you know, how simple it was. So how do you address that level and say, hey, you know, yes, you are at the top level, but you still need to have first experience?
So I have two different but related answers. The most success that I've had in talking to the C-suite is relating it back to business. So being in a technology company, and I've worked for technology companies all my life, especially in New York State now with the new regulations from DFS that came out, every third party that touches data from a financial insurance institution needs to be just as compliant. So explaining it in a way that it affects the business, like if you told them, you know, we can't do business with banks anymore if you don't do this, like we are not compliant and you need to be. That is one way that it tends to resonate with them, because those higher ups just care about money. They literally don't care about anything else most of the time. So if you can relate the effects back to how it would negatively impact the business, I've seen a lot of success with that. And then multi-factor authentication. They can have whatever shitty password they want if there's another layer of protection on there. Anyone else? Yeah.
Sorry to be a repeat questioner. There's a relatively well-known XKCD comic, battery, staple, yeah, you know the one.
Yep.
Okay. As a security professional, what's your opinion on that suggestion that's made in that comic?
I hate the phrase password. It should be a passphrase, for sure. The longer it can be, the better, and it makes it easier for you to remember it or your users to remember it. So passphrases are definitely recommended over a password, and that comic is perfect. I use it all the time.
But the comic suggested a particular phrase, which was basically all lowercase letters. So the number of potential characters in each slot was fewer, even though the character range was longer. How do you feel about that? Is what I was getting at.
I mean, I feel like there should always be uppercase, lowercase characters, numbers, but the point of that particular comic was it was long enough that any algorithm they're going through, any script that they're running would take so long to figure it out that it wouldn't matter that it was all lowercase. And that's true, but you should still do it. Make it longer for them. Like, don't make it easy.
one more digit on the end is worth way more than.
Oh, I know the math.
Yeah.
What I was wondering, I very much know the math, actually. No, I was wondering more along the lines of, okay, so
I encourage the
I work for a
complexity.
school. Literally a week from Tuesday, we're doing a security training session. It's an outside, because as one person once told me, you're never a sage in your own village. So there's an outsider coming in to give the spiel, but when I then have to carry the torch for the following year,
Right.
one of the things that I'll say is, make your passwords longer, and they're going to say, oh, but they're so hard to remember as it is. So reducing the simplicity at a human brain level of it's just a word. I'm thinking like rainbow table attacks and things like that. Is there a trade-off there? Because the math of it, as you said, you add a character, it gets exponentially harder, but that's a brute force attack assumption. There are other assumptions that could be made by the attackers, such as you're going to probably choose things from words.
Yep.
If you put together a string of, it could be a whole sentence, but if it's nonsense, they're gonna have trouble with a dictionary word where like horses, if you do like horseshoe playground, right? While those are all dictionary words, the string together doesn't make any sense for a rainbow table. So if you're not putting together like, it's not a real sentence, it's nonsense if you look at it that way. So while there's still words in there, the length of it together is hard for anybody to guess or even do a dictionary type against, because together it's nonsense.
And
But
that's
if
why
they
I
know
love
that you're recommending words, like most of us know and use on a daily basis only a few thousand words.
Mhm.
Let's say 10,000 for an easy round number. I think that number is actually kind of high, but let's say 10,000.
Right,
And you know that the average person is only going to remember 3 or 4 words. So you've got 10,000 characters, so to speak, and a 3-character long password. The math comes out kind of, once you view it that way, the math is very different
Right.
in terms of number of potential guesses. So,
I feel like there are ways that you can encourage them to use words that are not a sentence.
mhm.
Same with how I mentioned instead of white, you can use snowflake. So the words that they know,
Mhm.
relate them to other things that are longer words, more different words. I can see an exercise in that with you in your school, just going through, if this is the password you want, this is what we can change it to that would make it a stronger password, but you'll still remember it. Yeah.
Kind of related, and when Jonathan down there mentioned about his president, CEO, and then passwords, former CEO that I worked for, what I helped him with because of the password issue of 3 characters or his name. What we worked on together was, and it worked for a lot of people adopted it, but yeah, have a word, have a 10-character word. Change it out every month or every 45 days or whatever, but what you wanted is a code. So this is what helps him. Like I said, first consonant in the word is always a capital. The second letter or the second character within the word is a number. So he could still use a word and then he had a code, so the number might have been that 1, 2. So it helped him remember it without having to write it down. So he had a little code that, okay.
As long as he doesn't have that written on a Post-it note somewhere.
He did. Well, he did. He did.
Okay.
So, but it was like common that he could use second consonant is capital letter. The last vowel of the word is the number 8, but it helps.
Yeah, there are definitely tricks and encouragement and ideas that you can give your users to fix those things. And then if you are the person who decides on the actual policy, like within Active Directory, you can also just change group policy to require a minimum length, and you change it a certain amount of days. And that is going to be a company decision, not just your decision, but there are ways you can force them to do it also. Anyone else? Yep.
What about physical tokens? Do those help more?
There have been a lot of things in the news about that recently with Google and their physical tokens. Any multi-factor authentication is better than none, whether it's a physical token, a push code, an SMS message, a phone call, pick one and go with it. And a lot of tools will allow you to do a multitude of them. So Duo is my personal favorite that we use. You can choose to do an SMS code and then a push code, or a phone call and then a push code. So it's not even just a second layer, it's two. But you can choose that when you're configuring it. And the physical tokens also fit in there. A lot of people feel more comfortable with a physical token. They work just as easily as the rest of them.
Honestly, I've found it's easy to get people to use the physical tokens. If they're technophiles, they feel like it's a badge of honor. I got my my district superintendent using one just because he's a technophile, really.
Mr. Anyone else? Cool. Thank you guys for listening this morning. Feel free to